I know that we've said that these statements out in the national media, the Saturday Night Live skits, are distractions. I appreciate that. But to the voter in Delaware, it is the message that they are receiving. So we would be remiss if we did not address this issue. So the comments that you've made in the past, which are in your own words because they're on the videotape, have become the fodder for the late-night TV shows. You even released an ad that opened up by saying, "I am not a witch." And a local newspaper columnist said that the comments that you have been seen to be making make Delawareans cringe. So what do you say to voters who want the change but are uncomfortable by these remarks?
This election cycle should not be about comments I made on a comedy show over a decade and a half ago. This election cycle should be about what is important to the people of Delaware, how we're going to get real jobs back to Delaware, how we're going to get our economy back on track, how we're going to protect our senior citizens and safeguard our Social Security. These are the issues that Delawareans are concerned about. You know, as Wolf, you can attest, I have not welcomed this media attention. You've been asking for an interview for quite a long time. My priority has been getting back to the Delaware voters, meeting as many voters, going to as many community forums as possible so that we can counter these things. My opponent has said that the statements that we made in our 20s should be off the table. And after he made that statement, days later, he started running ads in his own campaign materials. He's going back on his word, using those statements to misrepresent my character. So again, I thank you for the opportunity for the Delaware voters to get to know who I am and what I'm all about, because what I can assure them is while I made statements, my faith has matured over the years, but regardless of my personal faith, when I go down to Washington, D.C., it is the Constitution that I will defend, and it is by the Constitution that I will make all of my decisions, and that will be the standard bearer for every piece of legislation that I will vote on.
Mr. Coons, you have a 1-minute rebuttal.
I was surprised to see in the newspaper in an interview a profile of both of us, Ms. O'Donnell's statement, pretty similar to what you just heard from her, that she would not have her faith be a central driver of her decisions if elected. And I'm interested if we can explore further your suggestion that the Constitution would be your guide, because I'm interested in hearing whether it's the Constitution as passed by the founders, the Constitution of 1920, 1930, the Constitution of 1975, the Constitution of today. Because to me, protecting a woman's right to choose, protecting reproductive freedom, and making sure that we've got on the record Ms. O'Donnell's views on things like prayer, abortion, evolution, is important. These aren't just random statements on some late-night TV show. These are relevant to her service in the United States Senate, what sort of judges she would confirm, what sort of issues she would take up. I'm someone who stands firmly behind the Constitution as it stands today. I respect stare decisis, the decided cases, the case law that governs the United States.
All right, but let's go to the issue of faith and politics, because you were a student pastor at Yale. You also said in an interview once that you thought you would either end up a preacher, a professor, or a politician. You've occasionally been a guest speaker at some of the churches here in our community, Baptist churches, Presbyterian churches, to name a few. So how much of an influence does this faith in your life have on your politics?
Faith is a central part of how my wife and I are raising our 3 children, of why we decide to do the community service and the outreach that we do. But ours is a faith that we think is a general motivation towards public service, towards trying to create a community that's more tolerant, inclusive, and just, and towards the sort of forgiveness, healing, and reconciliation that we think is the central message of our faith. But I also think, as someone who's been elected 10 years, I've learned to reach a balance where my private faith, the aspects of my faith that are religious doctrine, don't influence the decisions that I've made for the public in my 10 years in county office.
Well, let's give you a chance to respond to some of the things she said, because in a television appearance back in 1998 on Bill Maher's show, you said evolution is a myth. Do you believe evolution is a myth?
I believe that I was talking about what a local school taught, and that should be decided on the local community. But please let me respond to what he just said.
We'll let you respond, but answer the question. Do you believe evolution is a myth?
Local schools should make that decision, and I made that remark based on what I believe is irrelevant.
Why is it irrelevant?
Because what I will support,
what
I will support in Washington, D.C. is the ability for the local school system to decide what is taught in their classrooms. And what I was talking about on that show was a classroom that was not allowed to teach creationism as an equal theory as evolution. That is against their constitutional rights, and that is an overreaching arm of the government. But please allow me at least the full minute to respond to what he said, because he said these statements that we made should be taken into consideration when casting your vote. So then I would be remiss not to bring up the fact that my opponent has recently said that it was studying under a Marxist professor that made him become a Democrat. So when you look at his position on things like raising taxes, which is one of the tenets of Marxism, not supporting eliminating the death tax, which is a tenet of Marxism, I would argue that there are more people who support my Catholic faith than his Marxist beliefs. And I'm using his own words.
We're going to clarify
because a lot of people remember, because they've learned in the last few weeks, you did once describe yourself when you were in college a long time ago as a bearded Marxist.
Great question, Wolf. I hope folks will go and read the article. It's an article that I wrote as a senior the day of our commencement speech. And the title and the content of that clearly makes it obvious that it was a joke. There was a group of folks who I had shared a room with, my roommates junior year, who were in the Young Republican Club, and who thought when I returned from Kenya and registered as a Democrat, that doing so was proof that I'd gone all the way over to the far left end. And so they jokingly called me a bearded Marxist. If you take 5 minutes and read the article, it's clear on the face of it, it was a joke. Despite that, my opponent and lots of folks in the right-wing media have endlessly spun this. I am not now, nor have I ever been, anything but a clean-shaven capitalist.
Well, I would stand to disagree, because first of all, if you're saying what I said on a comedy show is relevant to this election, then absolutely, you writing an article, forget the bearded Marxist comment, you writing an article saying that you learned your beliefs from an articulate, intelligent Marxist professor, and that's what made you become a Democrat, right. That should send chills up the spine of every Delaware voter, because then if you compare that statement to your policies.
If it were true, I'd agree.
But that's what you said that on MSNBC just a few weeks ago.
That would be the last
You said that on MSNBC.
Let's go to an issue that you brought up about being schools, and this goes to you first, Mr. Coons, and this is the issue of education in our country. And in many public school districts all across America, as they're trying to get in accountability in the classroom, it is very difficult to dismiss an underperforming teacher because of the stringent contracts that have been negotiated with the individual school districts and teacher unions. So do you feel that teacher unions are too powerful?
Nancy, one of the things that I've complimented both Delaware's teachers and Delaware's governor for is their remarkable progress under the Race to the Top program. One of, I think, the best parts of the Obama-Biden administration's progress on education. I like both the process and the outcome. They set a very high bar. They offered a federal pot of money that was available for those states that were willing to make significant changes. And Delaware and Tennessee were two states that made that progress. Delaware's teachers union, the DSEA, came to the table and with the leadership of Governor Markell, made significant changes, things that a lot of folks predicted they wouldn't do, to embrace charters and to make them more powerful, to make it possible for schools that are underperforming to be shut down or restructured, and to change a system so that teacher compensation could be tied towards improvement by students in the classroom. I think our teachers deserve our support, and I think our teachers have a long tradition of contributing significantly, not just to educating our children, but to building a stronger and better community. My own mother and grandmother were school teachers, and I deeply respect the hard work that they do. Earlier today, I was at Eisenberg School in Newcastle, because this is National School Lunch Week. The work that our teachers do, the work that's done in early education, from Head Start to full-day kindergarten, through K through 12 education, the work that's done here and at other great public universities around the state and country is critical to laying the groundwork for our future. And I have no problem with recognizing that the folks who do the hard work, the teachers and the paraprofessionals, are entitled to a good standard of living, are entitled to be able to live a life where they have health care, they have a pension, and they have job security. I do think there are issues that we have to tackle, and I think Race to the Top made significant progress in them in making sure that our schools are performing as best they can.
You have a minute
Well,
to
if you
respond.
notice, he didn't answer the question as to whether or not he thought the teachers' unions were too powerful, and that's probably because he got their endorsement. I would say that what we need to do, especially here in Delaware, where we spend so much money on education, it ends up going to the six-figure salaries of our bureaucrats and our superintendents, not to the teachers in the classroom. It's appalling that in a state where we spend so much federal and state dollars on education, good teachers who want to get extra materials have to do so out of their pocket. I've met many teachers. I've sat down with them and talked to them about their concerns with race from the top. And whether they're Democrat or Republican, a lot of them express that we are not spending our education dollars appropriately. We are not helping the classroom. And what's going to happen when this race to the top funding dries up? We have a broken system, especially in Wilmington where I live. We have an extremely high dropout rate. Throwing more money on a broken system is not going to work. Instead, what we need to do is sit down and have conversations with the teachers, not the unions, about what they need us to do to help them in their classroom.
Over the years, a number of conservatives have proposed eliminating the Department of Education in Washington. Do you support eliminating the Department of Education?
I don't think that we need to go to that drastic of a step, but there, as I said, Senator Coburn has released a report that shows where millions of dollars in Department of Education money has been abused. That's the kind of stuff we have to stop. We also have to make sure that the money we are putting in to education does go to the classroom and make them more effective. That's something that we're ignoring. Every time that there's a problem, we just throw more money in it to appease the special interest groups. We're not getting to the root of the problem, and that's what we need to do, start getting to the root of the problem, which means talking to the teachers, and not only that, putting the power back to the parents over where they send their children to school.
In a recent survey of 30 industrialized countries, the United States ranked 25th in math, 21st in science. Finland was first in math. South Korea was first in science. Specifically, what would you do to make the United States #1, once again, in math and science?
Great question. And as someone who spent 20 years working with a nonprofit foundation, the I Have a Dream Foundation, that raises money from private individuals and helps provide scholarships for students, for teachers, and for college education. I've been hands-on and engaged with some of the toughest schools in America and some teachers who are significantly under-supported by their districts and who needed additional resources to deliver on the promise of an effective education. I think there's a significant role, though, for the federal government in providing financial support and encouragement. Scholarships for those teachers in STA in science and technology and engineering and math. We need a new generation of teachers who are fully prepared, fully qualified to engage their students in the classroom, to use the latest teaching tools and media, to teach to the standards that No Child Left Behind established and that need to be modernized and made more flexible and responsive. And we frankly need to use collaborative learning techniques.
I'm sorry, but we're timekeeping here.
I'll give you a very quick chance to respond. What would you do specifically to make the United States #1?
Again, what I would say, to improve our education, we have to empower the teachers to do what they need to do to be more effective. They're the ones on the first line of defense. They're the ones who have the most influence over our students. But we also have to empower the parents. So I support charter schools and I support student vouchers or school vouchers so that it gives parents, regardless of income, regardless of status, an opportunity for their students to have a shot at a great education until our public schools do improve.
Let's switch gears and talk about health care, which is such an important issue to millions and millions of Americans right now. Under the new health care law that was recently signed into law by the president, children now can stay on their parents' insurance policies until the age of 26. People can no longer be denied coverage for pre-existing conditions. Insurers, the big insurance companies, are prohibited from rescinding coverage if a customer becomes sick, and they can't impose any lifetime limits on essential benefits like hospital stays or expensive treatments. You say you want to repeal all of that?